Why did so many medieval sieges end in cannibalism? Medieval sieges were long, harsh, and full of hunger. With no food coming in and nothing left inside the walls, people faced choices that went beyond fear or faith. When starvation broke every limit, even cannibalism became a desperate act of survival. Number 1. Starvation behind the walls. When a medieval army ringed a town, the first weapon was not the trebuchet. It was time. Blocked roads and burned fields stopped grain, salt, and livestock from getting in. Mills sat idle. Bakers had no flour. Cellars that looked full in peacetime emptied in weeks. Garrison rations shrank from loaves to crumbs. People boiled bones for broth and scraped fat from pots. They shaved leather off belts and softened it in water to trick the stomach. Rats and dogs were trapped and eaten. Herbs, acorns, and grass stretched the pot, but did not stop weight loss. Hunger did not grow in a straight line. It came in waves that broke morale. The first wave hit the poor and the refugees who had rushed behind the walls. They had no stores. City leaders often pushed out the useless mouths to save food for soldiers and artisans. Many were trapped in the no man's land between gates and siege lines, and starved within sight of both sides. Inside the walls, the second wave hit the trades that fed the defense. Carters had no hay. Smiths had no charcoal. Without fuel, ovens went cold. Water stayed a lifeline, yet wells turned foul as waste piled up. Dysentery and fever followed thin diets and crowded rooms. The sick could not hold food. Even small injuries turned fatal. Death changed the food equation. At first, the dead were buried with care. As losses mounted, graves grew shallow or were not dug at all. Smell and fear displaced ritual. With no meat left, starving people looked at the dead as a last reserve. It often began as quiet scavenging. Families chose a corpse rather than surrender. They spoke in whispers. They told themselves the soul had gone, and only flesh remained. Commanders sometimes looked away, because a soldier who ate might hold a wall one more night. Once that taboo cracked, order slipped. Guards deserted posts to search cellars. Markets turned into black markets. Prices soared with each day without a convoy. A handful of grain could buy a life. Wood for boiling water cost more than the water. Salt lost meaning when there was no meat to cure. Hunger also changed strategy. Attackers tightened pickets to stop smugglers and foragers. They let deserters pass so the town lost mouths. They waited for the math to finish the fight. A castle that held thousands became a prison of calories. Every choice reduced to numbers. How many days of grain? How many fighters still able to climb stairs? How many children crying at night? In that math, cannibalism was the brutal endpoint of a long chain. No one planned it on day one. It emerged from blockade, failed relief, disease, and fear. The armor on the battlements hid ribs and sunken cheeks. The banners hid empty storehouses. When a gate finally opened, it was rarely because a wall fell. It was because the pantry did. Number 2. Psychological collapse during siege. Hunger breaks the body, but a siege first breaks the mind. People wake each day to empty markets, dead animals in the streets, and the same gray walls. Sleep is short because bells ring at night and engines thump against the gates. Brains starved of calories think slower and make harsher choices. Memory fades. Tempers rise. Small insults turn into fights because everyone is exhausted and afraid. Families hide crumbs in water. Neighbors stop sharing. Trust shrinks from the whole town to the small room where you sleep. Priests and elders preach patience, yet prayers feel weaker when children cry through the night. Many start to believe that God has turned away. That feeling of abandonment allows lines to move. Taboos look less absolute when the stomach hurts every hour. At first, people whisper about eating leather and rats. Then they whisper about the dead. Moral language softens to make the act possible. They say the soul has gone. They say the body is only flesh. This is how a community talks itself across a boundary it once called sacred. Commanders face a different strain. They count arrows, stones, and loaves, and know none will last. Each day they judge who gets food and who is pushed out as a useless mouth. That decision kills slowly in the ditch outside. Leaders also struggle with truth. If they report the real state of the stores, panic may start. If they lie, the final shock is worse. Civilians blame soldiers for hoarding. Soldiers blame merchants for price gouging. Rumors spread faster than reason because rumors offer a target. People point to outsiders, to refugees, to suspected spies. Scapegoats appear because blame feels like action. The besiegers deepen the wounds. They shout from ladders about relief that will never come. They send captured letters into the city to prove that no lord is marching to help. They let a few prisoners return thin and shaking to carry a message with their bodies. Every gesture turns the mind toward surrender or toward the darkest choice. Starvation also changes time. Days blur. People stop planning next month and think only of tonight. That short horizon strips away law and ritual. When someone finally eats human flesh, it is not a sudden madness. It is the final step in a chain of losses. First order, then faith, then shame. Many who cross that line do not brag or threaten. They hide and shake and try to live one more day. Cannibalism in sieges was not driven by cruelty. It was driven by panic, by hunger, and by the quiet collapse of a shared world. Number 3. Famous cases across Europe. Chroniclers across Europe described siege hunger turning into cannibalism when every other source of food was gone. The case most often cited is Ma'ara in 1098 during the First Crusade. Latin writers said that starving crusaders ate the dead after months of blockade and disease. Later authors argued over exaggeration, yet the core claim of corpse eating appears in several independent accounts. Around the same time, the long struggle at Antioch produced reports of soldiers and civilians boiling leather and fighting over scraps. Some narratives added quiet hints of cannibalism on the worst days. These texts were written by men of faith who hated to admit such acts, which makes their grim notes hard to dismiss. In France during the 100 Years' War, many towns endured sieges that emptied granaries. Rouen and other walled cities pushed out useless mouths to save ration strength. Chroniclers describe the outcasts dying in ditches, and the living stripping graves for meat in the final weeks. Flanders and Hainaut left stark records during the Great Famine of 1315 to 1317. Writers speak of people eating carrion, the bodies of the hanged, and the newly dead when grain failed and sieges added pressure. These accounts link urban blockades with regional shortages and show how local war could tip a starving province into open horror. In the German lands, siege stories repeat the same pattern. Town books and monastic annals from the Rhineland and Saxony record dog eating first, then rats, then the dead. Some name small castles where garrisons held on too long, and survivors confessed to corpse consumption after surrender. English sources from the 12th to the 15th century describe blockades that dragged on through winter. Writers note expulsion policies, price shock, and bodies left unburied within sight of the walls. A few texts say plainly that the starving ate human flesh before a gate opened. They do not dwell on details. They move on as if words could not stay with the scene. Italian warfare also produced similar notes. City annals recount sieges in Lombardy and Emilia, where defenders boiled belts and hides, where disease followed thin broth, and where rumors of cannibalism spread before relief arrived. In Eastern Europe, the pattern repeats under Mongol pressure and later civil wars. Russ's and Polish chronicles describe towns cut off by fire and cavalry screens. When relief failed, the living turned to the dead in dark corners. Across these regions, the stories differ in tone, yet the structure matches. Long blockade, failed foraging, expulsions, disease, shallow graves, quiet confessions after the surrender. Cannibalism appears as the last step in a chain that siege warfare was designed to build. Number 4. The brutal logic of survival. A siege is an argument about calories and time. The attacker wants the defenders to run out of food before he runs out of patience. The defender wants a relief force to arrive before the last store is gone. Everything that follows is shaped by that math. A town begins with fixed grain, salt, and livestock. Each mouth reduces the pile every day. Commanders know this, so they count people as carefully as arrows. They lower rations to stretch the clock. They move soldiers to the front of the line because a weak guard means a quick defeat. They push the old, the sick, and the poor towards the gates to reduce consumption. It is cruel, but in their logic, it keeps the walls manned a little longer. The attacker answers by sealing every path. He blocks rivers. He burns mills. He posts men to catch smugglers at night. He does not need to win a ladder fight if he can keep flour from crossing the ditch. Every day of blockade weakens the garrison and strengthens his bargaining position. Markets inside the walls shift under this pressure. Prices climb with every rumor of a failed convoy. Coin loses value when bread is rare. People trade tools and clothes for a bowl of broth. As animal fat disappears, bodies begin to feed on muscle. Work slows.